Hello and what is going on, guys? Today I'm going to cover the hilarious Ben Shapiro muff video. Okay, let's get into it. We'll see if you watch the entire 9 minutes of this, but let me just say I've heard it's gonna be stupid. We're gonna see what happens.
Legitimacy of any institution, which is what we're talking about here, the legitimacy of Brazil's governmental institutions or the United States' governmental institutions, rests on simple fundamental premises, and that is
Simple fundamental premises. Okay, let's see if he makes it simple.
a social fabric. If there's no social fabric, you can't have a solid government. It really is that simple.
Okay.
So here's the formula for legitimacy. Okay, now it's a bunch of symbols here. I'm going to explain them. And it is a formula that I've been working through myself. I'm not getting this from anywhere else. So take it with whatever grain of salt you wish to apply. Legitimacy, L, equals, and then here is the equation. It has a numerator and a denominator for folks who are listening to this. The numerator.
This, by the way, why here the guy is using the old X's and he doesn't even understand the basic rule that you don't have to have a parenthesis here. So I'm not let's talk about this equation here because I'm not saying I'm a math genius, but you don't have to have that. And I don't have to be a genius to point that out. This guy's trying to look smart. He's not very smart.
Essentially represents consent, and the denominator represents levels of control. The more consent you have to any authority, the more legitimate it is, and the more control is exercised, the less legitimacy you have if you don't have enough consent. Right? So when control is really high and you don't have a lot of consent, when the denominator in this equation is really high and you don't have a lot of consent, the numerator is very, very low, you end up with fractional legitimacy, loss of legitimacy.
Okay. And how, so this is supposed to calculate legitimacy, right? But I think there's a fundamental problem with Ben Shapiro's equation here. You can't just say, well, calculate we're gonna calculate something completely, like he can't pull out the numbers, right? He can't pull out the numbers for these variables, and that's why he won't be able to get the answer, and he's just stinking little liar.
That's what you're seeing in large swaths of the West right now. However,
We can't even disprove him because we can't even do the equation. It's so stupid.
when you have high levels of consent, when people live in social solidarity with one another, and when the
Yeah, how can you put that as a variable? How much social solidarity do people live with each other and the government? How? That's impossible. The guy's just making shit up again. This is his favorite thing. He always likes to make shit up. How are conservatives supposed to have any logic if they can't even do math because they don't understand that you have to have, if you are supposed to calculate an equation, you can't just have a bunch of letters, you have to have numbers, and the guy doesn't have any
government
numbers.
is good at its job, people are willing to give up a certain level of control to the government. The problem is that governments have a real tendency, when the numerator declines, when social solidarity declines, when the efficacy of the government declines, they have a tendency to try to ramp up the levels of control in order to jack up the adherence to the government. And it ends up becoming a spiral that fails. What you really have to do is loosen your grip and allow everything to be rebuilt at the local level. So here is the equation.
Okay, this is a libertarian, I guess, ish policy, but really I couldn't care less because this guy's got no. He can't do the equation right.
L equals, and the numerator is S plus, and then it's R times A plus I. Okay, so S in this particular equation represents social solidarity.
Yeah, fucking social solidarity. Yeah, tell me exactly how high the social solidarity is in your country, whatever, USA. Tell me, huh? Tell me. That'll take. You probably can't figure that out mathematically. You would find inconsistencies because say you would calculate 10 different values. You would say, well, what the people think of the government. Then you make a survey on that, and then you make 10 different. But well, and then you try to combine them and try to make some kind of social solidarity value. But still, it's gonna be off, and then the entire equation is off. The guy doesn't get it, dude. He doesn't get it. He just made up the funny math equation and thought he was a genius.
So if you have an area that has a lot of social solidarity, that's going to help the government. Because obviously social solidarity means you're all going to vote in ways that you're not going to offend your neighbor because you like your neighbor and you're not there to use the government to crack down on your neighbor. Plus, responsiveness of
Yeah, well, okay. I like my neighbor and what? So I'm not gonna let the government crack down my neighbor. Well, if my neighbor is doing some illegal shit, then why should I intervene, dude? I don't get this. This framing is really weird.
the authority to input, that's R, times the avoidability of the authority. So if you know that the government is both responsive to you and also if you're unable to get a response from the government, you're able to avoid the government, right? Can move out of the area. And this also contributes to the legitimacy of the government. I don't have to, if I'm in California and I don't like California, I can leave. That means that the government has a high level of legitimacy. One of the reasons being, even though I disagree with the way that California is governed, I can always take off, which means the people who are left there are consenting to being there.
Well, no, because some people are poor and just can't move around. Duh. Some people don't want to leave their family. It's full of holes, this guy. If you've got your family in California, maybe you don't want to travel somewhere else. Maybe you don't have the money to do it. This guy is just thinking like, oh well, if you're a rich billionaire, well, this is not an equation about rich billionaires, Ben Shapiro. It's not about you all the time, okay? Come on, this guy, he's getting so annoying.
Plus, I, which is the ability of any authority to advance the interests of its population. So, in other words, if government has the following aspects, it is going to have a lot of legitimacy at any level. This, by the way, doesn't just apply to governments, it actually applies to families as well. If there's a lot of social solidarity within the area governed by the government, if that government is responsive to input from people, if you can avoid the government, if the government doesn't rule the way you want to, you can leave. And if the government is very effective at implementing the needs and wants of its citizens, it's going to have a high level of consent. Okay, the
Yeah, obviously. No shit. Yeah. If if the government does what the people want, the people will like the government. Yeah, and the problem is that people want different things, you know? When are you gonna mention that? Huh?
denominator. These are the things the government can do to undermine its own
I
authority.
guess it's only about what white Republicans want, huh? Is that it? It's only about white Republicans want. Nobody else counts, right? That's the people. That's the people Ben Shapiro was talking about.
Essentially. V is violation of fundamental or pragmatic rights by the authority or destruction of rules and roles by the authority. So the government decides it's going to wipe away civil society. It's going to wipe away your rights. It is now jacked up the levels of control it is using against you. It undermines
What? Why would the government decide to do that? If we aren't in like a freaking fascist dictatorship like this guy wants, then why would the government do that? This makes no sense. This guy, dude, he just spurts a bunch of words and then he tries to make himself look like a genius. But if you actually think about it, he's stupid.
the legitimacy of the government. R, right? This is R prime. It's the regulatory strictness of the authority. So the authority passes very, very strong regulations to move against you. This undermines the legitimacy of the government unless you've consented at a very high level to that government. And finally,
Okay, so consent to the government. Okay, but wait, can't you have a strict and legitimate government? I don't make sense of that. How is this is more evaluating what the liberty is or whatever. That's more about freedom, you know. Legitimate government can be strict, although I wouldn't support one that is. I guess that's what he means, but he's very unspecific then.
the aggressiveness of the enforcement by the authority. So the factors that militate in favor of the delegitimacy of the government are if the government violates your rights, if it's very, very strict in its regulations, and if it aggressively enforces those restrictions. And at the same time, if the numerator is really low, meaning your consent to that government is really, really low. This is what we are increasingly seeing at the top level of Western societies right now. Very low levels of social solidarity within the polity governed by the authority. Multiculturalism rips apart social solidarity. Decline of religion, which is a great
Okay, so here we go. This is what he always wanted to get to. People should be white and religious, or they should get out of the country because it's bad for the government otherwise. Or what is that the point? That is the point, right? He hates immigrants, or hates. Well, no, no, no. I was no. He hates more people than immigrants. He hates everyone that is not a part of his ethnicity. Oh my gosh, this guy is being so. You could have just said that from the beginning instead of making a stupid ass math equation about it.
Great combined factor in preventing tribalism is falling away. As social fabric fades, that numerator starts to decline. It declines still further when the authorities are less responsive to input. This is one of the facets of bureaucratic government. When you have in the United States or in Brazil or anywhere else a regulatory state that basically has no input from the public, and you feel completely disassociated from that government, you have no input, that's a real problem.
Yeah, but that's why we have a democracy. Or what? Is it because you guys are pissed about the election? Is it really that again? Ben Shapiro, you are doing this so many times. Can you stop? This guy is being very annoying. First, the equation was about, I guess, Ben Shapiro hates multiculturalism and atheists, and now it's about Ben Shapiro hates democracy. Great. Well, let's see where we finish off with this one then.
Avoidability. When you're talking at the federal level, avoidability basically disappears. Unlike California, where if I don't like California, I can just move to Florida. It's a lot harder to leave the United States. So if the federal government decides that it is going to undermine
Well, I think it could be easier to look. It could probably be easier to move from Maine to Nova Scotia in Canada than to move from Maine to California. What's the thing about it? It depends on the distance, and it depends on border tolls or whatever, and it depends on getting citizenship and a wide variety of factors. It ain't that simple.
my rights, it's going to increase regulation and then aggressively enforce that regulation. It means it's very difficult for me to avoid. It's very difficult for me to leave. And this prompts, presumably, bad action against the government. And finally, is the
So that leads to bad action. Okay, okay. So he set up this entire scenario, which basically should justify January 6th. Is that it? This guy doesn't. Okay, okay. He wants to justify a military coup. I think that military coups don't work very well because you guys don't really have enough of a brain to do so. You know, you failed twice. Yeah, you failed in America and you failed in Brazil. I would stop with this military coup shit because you're just making yourself look even more stupid.
government actually good at doing the things the population wants it to do? And the answer here is more and more no. Now, the great irony of this is that in Western societies, as this numerator decreases and as the denominator increases, we have not gotten a set of rulers who have decided, hey, we better ease back on the amount of control we're trying to exert over our citizens because we don't have their consent. We're not.
I mean, sometimes there is government overreach, but you're always saying it. Like, you wouldn't care if it was all Republicans in the government. You care because it's the Democrats in power. That's the only reason you care, Ben. So stop with this all, well, I'm against all big government. No, you're just against the kind of big government that you don't like. Which everyone is, I guess. This makes zero sense. Okay, I have had. Anyways, let's watch the end. Let's see if he says anything.
That consent matters an awful lot more than control. Social solidarity matters a lot more than control. And this is why so many people are deeply upset about the fact that it seems as though, for example, in American government, there are a lot of people who are invested in the idea that we can continue to undermine the numerator in favor of the denominator.
Okay, so what he's saying is Republicans are pissed. Stop doing what we don't want. Well, I'm sorry, it's a democracy, so yeah, I don't care, Ben. In democracy, you know who wins? The people. You didn't have the people with you? Then I don't give a shit. You lost. We won. Please stop crying about it. So that was it, everybody, for this video. I hope you enjoyed. I tried to break down Ben Shapiro's arguments as good as possible, but this guy rambled so quickly that I get it if you are getting some of that minor brain damage that you get from listening to Ben Shapiro. It's totally understandable. Do something else for a minute because it can cause some real headaches. This guy, he talks way too quickly, and he's way too annoying. But he also tends to do the things that all these idiots do, which is make a video where it proves that they're a fool, which is good. So let's be happy about what's good in the world. And I hope you guys take care. See you in the next one.